Greetings, everyone from Vancouver, Canada. Welcome to tonight's Picket Action. We are going to start in just 3 minutes. We'll give people a chance to join, and we'll begin with a music video. Welcome. Hello again, everyone. Greetings from Vancouver, Canada. This is Alison Bodine, the host of tonight's monthly Picket Action, as well as the coordinator of the Fire This Time Movement for Social Justice Venezuela Solidarity campaign. We're going to start with a music video. It's a new song from Venezuela about Alex Saab. So I'm going to go ahead and put that up, and then we'll do our proper introductions. Welcome, everyone, to today's monthly Picket Action, the second, marking 2 years of monthly picket actions demanding U.S., Canada hands off Venezuela, free Alex Saab, as well as commemorating 10 years since the passing of Comandante Hugo Chávez. Thank you all for joining.
Todo lo que escuches es solo una opinión, no un hecho. Todo lo que vemos es una perspectiva, no la verdad. Por eso, amores, no perdamos tiempo en discutir sobre lo que debe ser una buena persona. Sé una buena y ya. Free Alex Saab, free Alex Saab. Venezuela está contigo, te vamos a liberar. Free Alex Saab, free Alex Saab. Tu pensamiento está libre, no lo pueden secuestrar. Free Alex Saab. Free Alex Saab, vamos si podemos, te vamos a liberar. Free Alex Saab, free Alex Saab. Tu pensamiento está libre, no lo pueden secuestrar. Un 12 de junio del 2020, fuiste secuestrado de repente. Privaron tu libertad injustamente. Violentaron tus derechos, Norteamerican agentes. Te juzgaron como un delincuente, engañando por los medios a la gente, solo por pensar diferente, buscando el bienestar diplomáticamente. Free Alex Saab, free Alex Saab. Venezuela está contigo, te vamos a liberar. Free Alex Saab, free Alex Saab. Tu pensamiento está libre, no lo pueden secuestrar. Free Alex Saab, free Alex Saab. Vamos si podemos, te vamos a liberar. Free Alex Saab, free Alex Saab. Tu pensamiento está libre, no lo pueden secuestrar. Te llevaron lejos con falsas acusaciones, intentando detener tus acciones por culpa de ambiciones que nada bueno proponen. Solo mala energía es lo que dispone. Secuestrado estás, pero levantando nuestra voz te daremos libertad, libertad, cantando nuestra verdad. En el mundo entero siempre ya se escuchará. Free Alex Saab, free Alex Saab. Venezuela está contigo, te vamos a liberar. Free Alex Saab, free Alex Saab. Tu pensamiento está libre, no lo pueden secuestrar. Free Alex Saab, free Alex Saab. Vamos si podemos, te vamos a liberar. Free Alex Saab, free Alex Saab. Tu pensamiento está libre, no lo pueden secuestrar. Liberen nuestro diplomático Alex Saab, te traeremos de vuelta. ¡Ja! Movimiento Alex Saab por Venezuela, en conexión con Fulvilla. Te traeremos de vuelta, hermano. La patria se mantiene viva y activa. Venezuela, Alex Saab, libertad, libertad. Te vamos a liberar.
Free Alex Saab.
Free Alex Saab. Tu pensamiento está libre, no lo pueden secuestrar. Free Alex Saab. Free Alex Saab.
So that was a very new music video for Free Alex Saab. For everyone listening tonight in English, it might not have been completely translated, but I think you get a very good idea of the love and solidarity that the people of Venezuela feel for Venezuelan diplomat Alex Saab, who is unjustly held in US prison in Miami and is one of the main focuses of tonight's action. Welcome again. If you are joining and listening in English or in Spanish right now, be aware that there is interpretation available. Thank you to Anna and Mercedes for joining us today and for helping us to make sure this event is bilingual. And to join the interpretation, if you haven't already, there is a globe icon in the bottom of your screen, and you can join that way by choosing to listen in English or in Spanish. We'll put some short instructions in the chat for anyone listening that can't quite hear and quite understand what is happening now and wants to switch languages. Again, my name is Alison Bodine. I want to welcome you here. I'm here in Vancouver, Canada, and we are joined together for the 24th consecutive monthly picket action for US-Canada Hands Off Venezuela, Free Alex Saab, End All Sanctions on Venezuela. That means 2 years of monthly consecutive actions that have brought together hundreds of people from many different continents, from many different countries and backgrounds, united under these demands, and that we have united every month to really express the feeling of people across the United States, Canada, around the world in solidarity with Venezuela as they fight for their sovereignty and self-determination. These monthly pickets are co-organized by the Venezuela Peace Committee in Winnipeg, Fire This Time Movement for Social Justice, Venezuela Solidarity Campaign, and Just Peace Advocates, with the support of Venezuela Solidarity organizations and individuals across Canada. Over the last 2 years, we have heard from dozens of supporters of Venezuela's sovereignty and independence and for freedom for Alex Saab from Venezuela, from the United States, from Canada, authors, intellectuals, activists, and today we have another excellent panel. Today is not only about marking 2 years of monthly pickets, but there's another and an important commemoration that we must make today. March 5th, 2013, the president of Venezuela, Hugo Chávez, passed away. So 10 years ago nearly, the world lost a great leader in the fight for social justice, environmental justice, a great leader in the fight for sovereignty and self-determination for oppressed countries and nations. And it is very important that we remember and commemorate Comandante Hugo Chávez today. In the words of Comandante Chávez, the ones I think of most often, he said, "Let the dogs of the empire bark. That is their job. Ours is to battle to achieve the true liberation of our people." And 10 years after his passing, I am sure that the people of Venezuela are carrying out that vision of Hugo Chávez. Under all sorts of attacks, sanctions, coup attempts, blockade, interference in their everyday lives, the arrest of Venezuelan diplomat Alex Saab, and so many other injustices imposed by the government of the United States on the people of Venezuela, They continue to fight to achieve the true liberation of their people, building the Bolivarian revolutionary process and carrying out the legacy of Hugo Chavez, of Comandante Chavez, who we will remember today. This month's Picket will hear speakers from Venezuela, Canada, and the United States about the legacy of Hugo Chavez and the continued struggle of the people of Venezuela against US sanctions, blockade, and attacks. We will also hear important updates on the case of Venezuelan diplomat Alex Saab, who is unjustly jailed in the United States for his work to circumvent the horrible impact of sanctions and blockade on the people of Venezuela. We have a really excellent panel of speakers, including Jose Newman Molina Garcia, who is a Venezuelan theologian and journalist and a member and leader in the Alex Saab Movement. INDHRIANA Parada, a Venezuelan lawyer and expert in human rights and author, and someone that we've been honored to often have join us here on the monthly pickets. Also a leader in the Free Alex Saab movement in Venezuela. Suzanne ADELY, who is president of the National Lawyers Guild in the United States. And NINO PAGLICCIA, a Venezuelan-Canadian activist and political writer based here in Vancouver. We also have with us Professor Luis Acuna, the Charge d'Affaires of the Venezuelan Embassy in Canada, speaking from Venezuela, and are especially honored because Professor Acuna worked hand in hand with Comandante Chavez, and we are looking forward to his reflections, especially tonight, if the internet holds out. So that's our panel for today. We will begin with our panel and then have time for greetings for people that have joined us from across Canada, and then time for our group photo at the end as well. Thank you everyone who's posted in the chat already and introduced yourselves. Please continue to do so. Let us know where you're joining from today, and go ahead and post your comments and support for Alex Saab and against US-Canada sanctions on Venezuela, to share with everyone our united voices. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and introduce our first speaker. INDHRIANA Parada is a Venezuelan lawyer, an expert in human rights, and member of the Free Alex Saab Movement. INDHRIANA is author of the new book, The Kidnapping of Alex Saab, A Legal Analysis. Welcome, INDHRIANA, the floor is yours.
Hola, Suzanne, un saludo desde Venezuela.
Hello, Suzanne. Greetings from Venezuela. And once again, I would like to thank you for the invitation in these monthly actions that are so important, organized by our comrades in Canada and the US, and with people from all over the world. People from all over the world are joining, uniting to denounce not only the kidnapping and unlawful detaining of our comrade Alex Saab, but also because of the imposition of all the unilateral coercive measures. We know that every day they are increasingly harming our population, our people. Alison, the last time that I was here, that I was sharing in the same space, we gave an account of how the case was going. And I remember that it was December 20th, last December 20th in 2022, when we were doing an analysis of the probatory hearings in the case of the detaining of Alex Saab. And we need to remember that on 12th and 13th of December, a series of hearings took place where the defense and also proved, and they discussed the proof, the evidence, testimonial and documental. And we heard from different experts. We said that December 20th was the last time that I participated in this action, and on that same day, the concluding hearing was taking place. We need to remember that This process took place by in terms of defending Alex Saab based on his diplomatic immunity. In this hearing, Alison, we did an analysis, and I remember that we said that Judge Robert Cola, he seemed to be giving personal opinions. And in that hearing, he said that he could have left the decision in the hands of the Department of Justice and asked the DOJ if they had recognized Alex Saab as a diplomat or if they recognized the Venezuelan government, Nicolás Maduro government, as Venezuela's constitutional government. Well, Alison, the decision of that immunity process was issued 3 days later on December 23rd, right before Christmas. First of all, it was a rushed decision because it should have been published on the 29th or 30th of December. However, we saw that Robert Scola, once the hearing was closed on the 20th of December, just 3 days later, he published a decision that when we analyzed it, and you said it that day, it shouldn't surprise us because of the marked political influence of this decision. It is a politically argued decision, but what was very surprising in that decision were the big mistakes, the important mistakes that it had. Through international experts, such as, for example, Femi Falana, he is a very well-known specialist in human rights, very well-known lawyer, who took the case of Alex Saab to the International Court in Western Africa countries, and he won the case against Cape Verde. He did an analysis of the judge's statement, and he said that this was a decision against Alex Saab, the most unexplainable or inexplicable decision because of the large amount of mistakes, of errors that this had. When we talk about errors, we mean errors in the conclusions, but also in terms of the rights. And we can give a brief example. For example, Robert Scola, when he starts recounting the facts and all of these decisions, of course, we have to know why this person is being tried. And Scola mentions an accusation based on a food program, a social food program, which is CLAP in Venezuela, which are local committees for production. And the judge says that what he was accused of in the US was based on this food program. But further on, he says that this behavior, this criminal behavior, alleged criminal behavior, is from 2015, but he makes this big mistake because in no moment has Alex Saab been accused of misconduct related to any food program. And for one simple reason, it was impossible. It was impossible that he was accused for this program because this food program was born in 2016. So the years where he is accused supposedly of misconduct between 2011 and 2015, this program didn't even exist. So we can see that the judge himself is not clear about the accusations towards Alex Saab. But we also see that he also makes mistakes in the interpretation of the law, because it seems that Judge Scola, it seems that the trial against discusses the rights of the United States to acknowledge or to recognize a government.
This is not being discussed within the U.S. tribunal anyway. What is being discussed is the obligation of the U.S. towards the international pacts that the US ratified and confirmed, for example, the Wien Convention on Diplomatic Relations. We need to remember that in this process, which is not the penal process, request of denying these accusations, what should be discussed was whether Alex Saab was entitled to the protection as diplomat, convention, an immunity that the US had to respect. Now, wrongly, the judge here, with a very strange interpretation and manipulated interpretation of the law, denies the need to respect the Wien Convention on Diplomatic Relations. But another thing that calls our attention here is how the judge also credits a process within Cape Verde, and he mentions the need to respect due process, which has to do with the many days that our diplomat was within Cape Verde during his first kidnap. And he actually mentions that this was a just procedure, that due process had been followed. However, he approves of this process, but at the same time, he ignores the decision taken by the International Court of West African Countries, which includes a binding decision on Cape Green, where there's an order there to free Alex Saab, because due to the aberration of this process, Cape Verde had arbitrarily detained him. There was here a violation of the fundamental human rights of our diplomats. So we see here marked contradictions and a very strong political influence. For example, in one of the paragraphs where it states that, if anything, Alex Saab was traveling as an envoy of the regime of Maduro. However, the US did not acknowledge Maduro as the legitimate president of Venezuela, and as such, no official of Venezuela had any right to any kind of claim within the US tribunal. So all of these arguments, all of this makes evident what we have already been denouncing before, which is that we are facing a political process. And sadly, the judge, scholar, leaves it in writing with absolutely subjective arguments, where, for example, he also discredits each and every of the proof that the defense presented. We could even here have some of the proofs presented by the defense weren't even mentioned. They have been ignored. And on the other hand, he takes as fact, as true, the arguments of the DA. And here, for example, one of these is a supposed collaboration of our diplomat with the DEA, the Agency Against Drugs of the US. However, there is no evidence here more than a document written by these agencies of the US themselves. So the judge takes as a fact all of the affirmations made by the prosecutor, while discrediting entirely the arguments of the defense, including here also the legal documents issued by Venezuela's president. And here it's important to mention that all of the proof presented by Venezuela here, they have the nature of a public document in agreement with international laws, such as the ones demanded by, for example, the Agreement of The Hague. So according to the rules and the process of the US itself. So Right now, we are very close to reaching the mark of 1,000 days with Alex Saab kidnapped. And it's been almost 500 days since the second kidnapping within the territory of the US. And this decision proves once again that our diplomat is a political prisoner. He is a prisoner of the war of the US against Venezuela. And a product of this decision, a product of the very serious mistakes, the legal team of Saab has announced they will present an appeal in the 11th Circuit of Appeals of Georgia, Atlanta. And of course, now we need to wait for the process to move forward. Important also here to mention that the criminal proceeding is also at a halt here. Our diplomat, Alex Saab, was on a humanitarian mission for the government of Venezuela when he was detained without any previous notice, without any red Interpol order, and from then on, all of his human rights have been violated. So it is something that we need to keep in mind. It's been almost 1,000 days without visiting with his family, without seeing his daughters, without receiving any medical attention. And he is a survivor of cancer. He has been criminalized and accused without being able to exercise his right to defense. And the judge scholar also ignored the criteria of jurisprudence of the Supreme Court of the United States itself, because he ignored a very important precedent. That is the case of Abdulaziz, which I mentioned before, a case with a very similar defense from ours. This was a diplomat from Saudi Arabia. This as a status that had been given and accepted by the US even after he had been accused for a crime within the US. All of the crimes show once again that there is an arbitrary detention here of our diplomat, and what they want to do with this is to send a terrorist message to the world. The US wants to show that through any means, including the judicial process and lawfare, they will go after the political enemies. The detention of our diplomat prevented a humanitarian mission in the midst of a blockade, and not only that, but also in the midst of a pandemic. This also meant difficulties to continue moving forward with the programs that provide food, medicine, and fuel to our people. So we continue on denouncing and calling on the international community. The case of Alex Saab is a case that touches on all the countries because it is a violation of the main international pacts, including the Wien Convention on International Relations, but also ignoring the requests of the UN Human Rights Council and the Commission for Human Rights of African countries, including the ruling of an international court. There is here an intention to impose the subjective position of a court that has no position, taking a stance on the decisions of a sovereign country such as Venezuela. And please, I'm open to any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, INDHRIANA, for always being with us and giving us the updates on the case of Alex Saab from a perspective that's easy to understand and to see clearly, as we have both said, the nature of this case being a complete violation of international law, human rights, but a clear political case against Alex Saab. Almost 1,000 days held first in Cape Verde under house arrest and under torturous conditions, and then kidnapped to the United States 990 days ago. He's been in the United States in jail for almost 500 days, 499 days. And last Picket action, we were so honored to hear his voice, that Camilla Saab, his wife, recorded a message of solidarity from within the US jail from Miami. And we can carry that with us, carry your words with us in your continued work, I know, every day to fight for his freedom side by side his family. So thank you again for your message today and for your work of writing the book, which I believe is only available in Spanish, but for anyone interested, please, we can share the PDF online. Thank you again. So we now...
Alison,
Sí, sigue.
Alison,
dentro de poco podrá estar.
very soon we'll also have a translation into English, and I will share with you too. And I also wanted to highlight just one more thing here to highlight that the Tunisian League had presented a nomination to Alex Saab for the Nobel Prize for Peace. This is something that honors us, and we're very happy about it. And we also want to support this nomination. This is a decision that was made and shared by the Vice President. And what she mentioned is that she studied the file. And we've always said that anyone who reads the actual file of this arbitrary process full of violations will be won over for the defense of Alex Saab and his case. She also had the possibility to meet him and see how he is constantly suffering under attempts of humiliating him. He's been also mistreated, constantly insulted, precisely for, as we say, to send this terrorist message on behalf of the US. We, from Venezuela, want to call on all of the organizations of human rights, all of the defenders of peace to support the nomination, because again, in the words of the Vice President of the League, the Tunisian League, he risked his life, he risked his integrity in an attempt to defend peace within Venezuela. But he also continues to send a message of peace after 1,000 days, a message, as you mentioned, about reconciliation. So thank you.
Thank you. Very exciting to hear about the English book being available soon. So the next speaker that we're going to invite today is someone that has been working also on the legal case and advocacy for diplomat Alex Saab, but was also someone that was able to visit Alex Saab in prison in Miami very recently and to speak with him and report on his condition and kind of let us know how he is doing. We're very grateful as people, as supporters of Alex Saab, that Suzanne ADELY was able to visit him. Also, Suzanne is working on an important project of groups in the United States and internationally coming together to work on a tribunal, a people's tribunal against US imperialism, which has talked extensively about Venezuela and really putting the United States program of sanctions, wars, blockades, and attacks on trial. So we're looking forward to hearing some about that. Suzanne ADELY is president of the National Lawyers Guild in the United States and a bureau member of the International Association of Democratic Lawyers, and she will speak next. Welcome, Suzanne, to the monthly Picket Action.
Thank you, Allison, and thank you to all the organizers. Yeah, as Allison mentioned, I had the opportunity to visit Alex on January 25th of this year. We, the National Lawyers Guild, have known about the case from the beginning of the attacks against him in Cape Verde. Some of my colleagues and I were in Venezuela as election monitors in the last sort of local election phase that took place. And we had the opportunity then to meet with Camellia and some of his legal advocates in Venezuela. And then we returned back to the US, with the goal of helping to sort of raise more awareness around the case. And I was able to visit him in Miami, along with my colleague, Audrey Bomsey, who is a longtime advocate for political prisoners in the United States. And, some of the reasons why, we wanted to visit him was, I guess, firstly, to check on his well-being and the conditions of his confinement in the federal prison in Miami, to also use the opportunity to express our solidarity with Alex and talk to him about the growing movement to free him. And we also, had hoped that such a visit could help build more momentum around his case, and particularly among the social justice and legal community in the US. And it has, we've been able to go back and report on our visit with our membership, with our of legal workers and human rights lawyers. So he was certainly visibly exhausted, right? But at the same time, he appeared strong and steadfast. And that's something like my colleague Audrey, who has visited numerous political prisoners over the years, kind of made the point of saying that, despite the visible sort of like physical and emotional exhaustion that he was exhibiting, that, he appeared strong and he was very eager to talk to us, right? And some of the things that, we've learned that I think many of you also know about his confinement in Miami is that he hasn't been able to visit with his family members. He also hasn't been afforded a consular visit, and also in violation of international law. And he hasn't been getting adequate health care, is particularly important given his, the fact that he is a cancer survivor. But he also didn't want us to sort of raise the issue of healthcare in prison too much, because as he pointed out, that was something that all the prisoners in the detention center really are going through, the lack of sufficient healthcare, and that in instances where prisoners in the detention center have raised that issue, there's been retaliation. He does get almost daily visits from members of his legal teams, which is at least something. And I'm just going to talk a little bit about like what we learned in conversation with him. It was overall a very good opportunity to hear Alex talk about his ordeal, through his eyes and what he's been through. And he continues to reiterate that he has done nothing wrong, and that he is purely a political prisoner who's being targeted for his role in challenging the sanctions, and that he knew about the risks that he was taking, and reiterated that he chose to take those risks, right, because it was important to challenge the sanctions, and particularly at a time, as he pointed out, some of those trips that he took as a special envoy took place at a time when the impact of the sanctions on Venezuela were exasperated by the impact of COVID, and it was a very sort of serious situation. He also talked to some extent about his experience in Cape Verde, right? About his imprisonment there in solitary in a small dark cell, and very briefly about how he was harassed, interrogated, and tortured by masked men who he pointed out spoke U.S. English with no accent. But it actually was very difficult for him to really kind of elaborate on those conditions. And he was very visibly shaken and emotional when recalling that experience. He pointed out to us that in the months leading up to his kidnapping from Cape Verde, there was actually a U.S. warship that was anchored off the coast of Cape Verde for months. It was something that was confirmed in a book by Mark Esper, former Secretary of Defense. We also learned, which we didn't know before we visited him, that there is a gag order on him and his legal team. For that, he could not speak directly to us about his criminal case. One other thing that we learned that some of you may know, that there was also a Swiss investigation looking at sort of the same charge that he's being charged with in the United States. That was a 3-year investigation that was ultimately dismissed for insufficient evidence. It was dismissed in March of 2020, a year after his kidnapping from Cape Verde. He also talked a little bit more in detail to us about the evidence that was submitted to the courts about the U.S.'s understanding of Alex Saab as a special envoy on a diplomatic mission, including, the book by Pompeo, Trump's secretary and CIA head, that has within there evidence that they understood Alex to be a special envoy on a diplomatic mission. He also mentioned documents that they were able to acquire through FOIA requests, even though many of the documents that they were seeking, they could not access. From among the documents they were able to access, it also was clear that the Biden administration also understood him as such. I think, so it's important to reiterate again, because we knew this, but we asked Alex the question directly, do you consider yourself a political prisoner? And he said, yes, absolutely. You can't really find a case going on right now that is more political than the case sort of being levied against me. And I think it's also really important to reiterate, as the previous speaker was speaking about, the sort of direct and really absurd U.S. violations of international law in Alex's case, including the kidnapping, the torture, the violation of the Vienna Conventions, and really the use of U.S. courts to enforce and legitimize U.S. imperialist policies, right? Which we have seen before in political cases in the United States, but in a kind of very outrageous way in the December ruling around the question of Alex's immunity. And, was just mentioned how the courts basically first chose to ignore the evidence of Alex's diplomatic immunity, and but went further to say that, even if he could prove that he was a special envoy, the United States doesn't recognize the legitimacy of the Maduro regime. So this is, clearly that, a case of the courts not sort of being utilized to adhere to the rule of law, but instead to enforce and legitimize U.S. imperialist policies. Alex very much put his case also in the context of sanctions from the very beginning of our discussion. And, he talked about how the economic coercion against Venezuela by the United States began even before, the passing of the official sanctions policies against Venezuela, but began as soon as Chávez came to power. And one thing that he said to us about sanctions was that, he felt that really a nuclear war would be better, because at least he directly said at least with nuclear war, you will die immediately. With sanctions, like, we die every day. And he also talked about how both in through his experience in Cape Verde, and then also presently, that one thing that the U.S. Government and the agents have been trying to do is sort of to get Alex to cooperate them and make statements against the Maduro regime, and sort of come to sort of some bargaining with them, and to admit some kind of wrongdoing, and he has maintained that that's not something that he would ever do. Right? He sort of is, as I said, strong and steadfast in in understanding that he has done nothing wrong, and that he is a target of U.S. imperialist policies. He's a target of the United States because of the very important and valuable role that he played in challenging U.S. sanctions against Venezuela, in helping to neutralize those policies. And as Allison mentioned, I'm part of this project called the International People's Tribunal on U.S. imperialism, looking at economic coercive measures, which is a term that we use to refer to sanctions, blockades, and other types of economic coercive measures on nations of the global South in particular. And the case of Alex Saab is really sort of important in talking about what we're trying to achieve through this tribunal. It's vital that we continue to raise the violations of international law and the mistreatment and and the real sort of absurd political case against Alex, and for the basic sort of reason of supporting Alex and his human rights, right? But it's also vital that we do whatever we can to mobilize to defend folks like Alex, who are putting themselves at risk to challenge economic coercive measures like the sanctions on Venezuela, right? And who are putting themselves at risk to challenge U.S. imperialism, whether that's Alex or anyone else. So I just then want to talk a little bit more about about this tribunal. I'm one of the coordinators and jurors, and as Allison mentioned, that this is a global effort. And it's a global effort to build systems of accountability rooted in global cross-movement solidarity, both within and outside of the law, to challenge the violence of imperialism through sanctions. And we are looking at the impact of economic coercive measures on over 16 nations in the global South, in Africa and Asia, and in the Americas. And we're looking at the impact of those measures in various sort of sectors of society. And we're doing that, number one, to expose what these policies are, right? Or policies to maintain a global imperialist, capitalist imperialist world order, right? And to use kind of these tribunals to interrogate the impact of these sanctions, but also the intent and of the imperialist states and imperialist institutions like the United Nations who impose these kinds of policies, right? And in order to destabilize countries or facilitate regime change, or to put pressure on these countries to be in line with U.S. interests or sort of global capitalist interests, right? And we're hoping that interrogation could lead to legal causes of action against these policies in the United States and in other courts around the world. But more importantly, like we're hoping that this tribunal does, in addition to exposing what these policies actually are, that it helps us kind of build a popular global political consensus over the need to dismantle these policies and challenge U.S. imperialism as a whole. And if you'd like to learn more about the tribunal, we launched the tribunal in January, and so far we have had hearings on Zimbabwe, sanctions on Zimbabwe and Korea. And we will continue to do different country hearings every month, 1 or 2 countries a month. And we are going to close the tribunal in Venezuela in July of 2023. And I will put the link to our website in the chat for anyone who's interested in learning more. And I'm sure there's more that I can say, but I'll just wait for Q&A. Thank you, Allison.
Thank you, Suzanne. You've predicted well the Q&A because there are 2 questions already just for you. Thank you for joining us again, for visiting with Alex Saab, and for all the work of the National Lawyers Guild and others on building support for his case and against criminal U.S. sanctions. It's vital information for us, all of us who are working to build a more united and broader movement where we can reach people from all sectors of society. It's very important to have the backing of the NLG and kind of the information that can bring to folks. So the Q&A questions, one is if you've heard if Amnesty International has said anything about Alex Saab or taken on his case. And the second is just regarding the gag order, if there's any more information about the justification for the gag order or how it may impact the case. And thank you for posting the link in the chat. We posted it earlier as well, just so you know, but it's good to have as many times as possible. I encourage people to support that important initiative. But Suzanne, those are the questions. Very quick.
Want me to do that live? Oh, or do we?
Yeah, if you don't mind.
Yeah, no. Yeah, I'm not aware that Amnesty International has taken up the case, but I think we should encourage them to do so, as well as other legal organizations in the US. Yes, we did get a copy of the gag order, and we'd be happy to share it. And from what we were told, the justification was because of how the media would politicize the case.
Thank you. I imagine, with all aspects of this case, there is a political reason behind these decisions being made in legal courts, and they can probably come up with a lot of justifications for a gag order to be imposed. So we'll keep on top of that and letting folks know. But thank you again to Suzanne Adley, President of the National Lawyers Guild, for being with us here today. So for our next speaker, I wanted to say that Father Numa Molina is having some internet issues. So he's come and gone in the background here, but has not been able to find a stable enough internet connection yet. So we'll hope for that as we go on in the monthly picket action. But for now, I'll go ahead and introduce our next speaker. NINO PAGLICCIA is a Venezuelan-Canadian activist and political writer based in Vancouver, Canada. He is a frequent contributor to several progressive online media outlets and editor of the book Cuba Solidarity in Canada, 5 Decades of People-to-People Foreign Relations. NINO also helps produce a weekly program, a radio program on Venezuela called Venezuela Viva. So thank you, NINO, for joining us here today. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thanks, Alison. And mi saludo a todos los panelistas y mis compatriotas.
And I would like to greet all the panelists and also my fellow Venezuelans and the participants in the webinar. Now I will apologize, but I will speak in English. Thank you to the
I will
interpreters.
speak, actually about Hugo Chávez's legacy, as we remember him on the occasion of his passing 10 years ago. But to start, I have to say that the word the legacy comes from the Latin verb legare, which, among other things, also means to send as an ambassador. In fact, originally, the noun meant ambassador or envoy. Now, I'm not a linguist, but I thought that would be sort of relevant to mention as we speak of envoy Alex Saab. In fact, we could say that he is carrying out a legacy from the Bolivarian people of Venezuela. And if his nomination for the Nobel Prize goes through, we could also say that he will be carrying out a legacy from the people of the world. So that's my reference to Alex Saab, but I will speak now about the legacy of Hugo Chávez. Now, to do that in 10 minutes, that's quite a challenge. I'll do my best and probably try to focus mostly on some specific issue. Chávez is remembered as a Comandante Supremo. He's the builder of the Bolivarian Revolution, founder of the Fifth Republic, and he has been the architect of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, the same one that the US empire does not recognize or refuses to recognize, of which he was president from 1999 to 2013. And he's also been the promoter of one of the most progressive constitutions in the world. He has left a positive and comprehensive legacy for the oppressed people of the world, in fact. There is no aspect of human development, political leadership, ideological position, and geopolitical impact that Chávez has not influenced in some meaningful way. With Chávez, Venezuela has been the epicenter of a revolutionary movement that wants to establish a different political paradigm for Latin America. A paradigm that with an orthogonous ideology, with historical and cultural elements, not only repeating the past, but also adding new elements and experiences from the global context of our era. Chávez called this new paradigm Socialismo del siglo XXI, socialism of the 21st century. Now, to those who would jump and question this revolutionary movement today, I would remind them that socialism is a living process that is constantly under construction. Chávez was clear that he was not offering a final worked out theory or ideology. Chávez only indicated the path towards a just society. But this path had clear landmarks leading in the correct direction, such as independence, self-determination, sovereignty, justice, peace, democracy, and popular power. But this could only be achieved with two further landmarks or elements: unity and anti-imperialism. And the work had to be done with the involvement of all Venezuelans as protagonists, as actors and builders of the just society. What Chávez unmistakably provided was a solid foundation on which to build that society, a foundation that would reunite Venezuelans and Latin Americans for that matter, to their historical roots. And with that, it would be able to resist the US endless imperial hybrid warfare. He was well aware of Simón Bolívar's famous statement, "The United States seems to have been created by Providence to plague America," meaning Latin America, "with misery in the name of freedom." So Chávez offered Bolivarianismo as the antidote to this plague. Perhaps the two words that capture Chávez's full legacy when we look at the core of their meaning are Bolivarian revolution. We repeat that every day, and they have a deep meaning. The word Bolivarian revives the independence values of the 19th century, based on the integrationist vision of Simón Bolívar, the idea of civic military unity of Ezequiel Zamora, and the liberating popular education of Simón Rodríguez, who was Simón Bolívar's mentor. Hugo Chávez took from them his own vision of building the Bolivarian Patria Grande, the great homeland, based on the original principles of sovereignty and independence with the people as protagonists. Recalling in an interview the founding of the Movimiento Bolivariano Revolucionario of 1982, which was the forerunner of the Partido Socialista Unido de Venezuela, Chávez said, and I quote, "That was what we were pursuing, a revolution, a political, social, economic, and cultural transformation inspired in the proposition of Bolívar, Zamora, and Rodríguez. This is how we designed what we have called el árbol de las tres raíces, the tree of the three roots, which is our ideological source," end quote. So there are historical roots that characterize the notion of Bolivarianismo. However, in the expression Bolivarian revolution, it is the word revolution that identifies the tree with three roots, or the ideological source of Bolivarianismo. It is the word revolution that is associated with Chavismo. As Bolivarianismo gives us the historical foundation, Chavismo gives us the projection of Bolivarianismo into the future. So Chavismo, with its Bolivarian roots, is what is known as the Bolivarian Revolution. Now, these two words cannot be separated without inevitably losing its original meaning. The tree cannot be separated from the roots without losing the harvest of its fruits. In the span of 10 years since the death of Hugo Chávez, Venezuela has undergone one of the most severe economic warfare launched by the US empire, with criminal coercive measures that are crippling the Venezuelan economic system. But Chávez's legacy still stands today. His legacy included his trust in the Venezuelan people, this is fundamental, and his political successor, Nicolás Maduro, just as fundamental. We, in turn, must hang on to Chávez's legacy by using our dialectical analysis of today's political environment and the global context to continue building our Bolivarian project. Imperialism is seeking to create cracks in the Bolivarian revolution at the slightest sign of weakness. This is the time to pay attention to Chávez landmarks that I mentioned before. Two in particular, unity and anti-imperialism, and follow the path to socialism. If the road is blocked, we take a detour and we will rejoin the main path when the objective conditions are appropriate. This is not the time to enter the dangerous political maze of doubts and blames. And it is never the time to be divided. The Bolivarian Revolution cannot die. The price of losing the Bolivarian Revolution is too high. As Fidel once said, history tells us that a defeated revolution must pay the victors in blood. Perhaps Hugo Chávez meant to give us another message with this image of the tree with three roots. A tree resists the impact of stormy winds by bending before returning to its straight position. Otherwise, it snaps and dies. Comandante Hugo Chávez, presente. Thank you.
Comandante Chávez, presente. Thank you, NINO PAGLICCIA, for that.
Gracias.
Yes, short, encapsulated analysis of Chávez's legacy. I think this monthly picket action, the work that we do together to build a more united and broader solidarity movement with Venezuela, is also following those footsteps of Chávez, who teaches us, yes, about unity and strength and continuing the struggle. So those are kind of our main panelists for today. I'll let Professor Luis Acuña kind of prepare his thoughts for greetings tonight, because I want to take a moment to introduce a new campaign initiated by the Fire This Time Venezuela Solidarity Campaign, which is a postcard campaign for Alex Saab. This is a postcard to be mailed to US President Biden from people in Canada, the United States, and around the world, expressing our demand that Alex Saab be freed immediately. Calling out the US government for their support and their continuation of brutal sanctions, which have been responsible for at least 40,000 deaths from 2017 to 2018, just 1 year, as estimated by the Center for Economic and Policy Research, and explaining the case of Alex Saab and how it is an injustice against the people of Venezuela and a violation of international law. In signing this postcard, which everyone will have the opportunity to do, we will together call upon everyone to call upon President Biden to free Alex Saab immediately and return him to his wife, children, and loved ones in Venezuela. So there have been similar postcard campaigns for other political prisoners, including the Cuban 5 heroes, for those that were involved in the case of those political prisoners, which were ultimately all released on December 17th, 2014. We want to continue that example of a campaign and make these postcards available to anyone who's interested and able to distribute them. So I'm going to go ahead and put the email in the chat where you can write to get more postcards. We'll be launching more information very soon and on social media, but let's everyone, I look forward to joining with you together in this new postcard campaign to Biden, demanding freedom for Alex Saab. You'll see, I already have a number ready here to send out to everybody. So let's get started on that campaign. We'll put more information in the chat, and thank you all for your support for freedom for Alex Saab, and let's continue working together. So Again, this is the postcard for Alex Saab, and let's continue this campaign and continue bringing the legacy of Hugo Chavez into our work for Alex Saab and his freedom. Our next speaker to give greetings here today, we're always grateful for Professor Luis Acuna, who makes the time. He is still working as the charge d'affaires of the Venezuelan embassy in Canada, although he is living in Venezuela and unable to return to Canada due to the breakdown in diplomatic relations between the government of Canada and the government of Venezuela. Canada, of course, has joined with the United States in their campaign of sanctions and blockade and refusal to recognize the democratically elected government of President Nicolas Maduro. And this means that Professor Luis Acuna has to be in Venezuela, although he is the charge d'affaires of the Venezuelan embassy here in Canada. He is the former governor of the state of Sucre, and as I said, a co-fighter along with Hugo Chavez in the beginning and building of the Bolivarian Revolutionary Project. So Professor Luis Acuna, I know the internet is not very good today, but we look forward to hearing just a few words from you, marking 2 years of these monthly picket actions, as well as 10 years since the passing of Comandante Hugo Chavez. Welcome.
Hello, Alison. Hello, everybody there. My congratulations to you, Alison. Been 2 years working for, in behalf of the people of Venezuela, not only for the freedom of Alex Saab. You have been working for all of us regarding our needs for food, for medicines, the very, very hard situation that Venezuela has been with the sanctions. And this webinar during 2 years has had many, many people who have helped us. I mean, our voice in Canada and in the US was here because you were there. So we want to thank you. We want to thank for this time and all the sponsors of this program, because we really think that you have been helping us so much. And not only, with your program, but also the many, many meetings and your trips and all you do and all the people there do in behalf of us. I want to congratulate and thanks to those so many people who work for the freedom of Alex Saab, like Suzanne ADELY. I want to thank her and all the people who are doing that job. From here, I have to thank INDHRIANA PARADA and all the people who are in that team that is helping with the case of Alex Saab. That even though we are fighting it from the legal point of view, we know that it's a political situation that is not easy. I mean, the judges in the US won't hear any legal reasons, because they have the political order to keep Alex Saab in jail. We will keep working, and we are sure that Alex is going to be free. I am very sad that Padre Numa Molina is not with us today, because he was along with the wife of Alex Saab, and I committed him to come to this program and talk. So I am sure that he will be next time. He is a very, very important voice regarding those so many years in behalf of our people. I want to thank NINO. NINO is a very, he's a fighter. He's one more of the Venezuelan who fights every day He does it from Vancouver. We do it from here, from Venezuela. And we are sure that we are going to go through this situation that we are suffering now, because the sanctions are still on. I mean, the sanctions are not being lifted. Some companies have had some, facilities to do jobs with Venezuela because they need oil, not because they want to leave the sanctions out. It's just because they need oil and they need gas. For example, they are giving us the possibility to deal with Curacao to explore the gas that is in between the two countries, but Curacao will not be able to pay in cash to Venezuela. We will have to be paid in goods. We need the money to be able to pay our people here to do what we have to do with our hospital, with the schools and everything. I really think that Presidente Maduro has done a very, very hard work. I mean, Presidente Maduro, during these 10 years since Presidente Hugo Chávez died, has suffered so much. He has been pushed so hard, but he is still there, and he will be there, because with Presidente Maduro is the people of Venezuela. They are the strength of Presidente Maduro are the people of Venezuela. As you said, we are in the 10th, 10 years ago, Presidente Chávez died. We think that Presidente Chávez, since the very, very beginning, was seized by the US. They wanted to overthrow him, and since they couldn't do it, I think they poisoned Presidente Chávez. Most of us think that he did not die from a natural disease, that he was inoculated with something in order to get rid of him. And after that, they thought that everything was done. And now that is Nicolás Maduro there, everything is done. But now Nicolás Maduro have been very, very strong, and he will succeed with this country, because we are going to help him. Presidente Chávez, he was a friend, he was a leader, not only of Venezuela, he was a leader of the Latin America mainly, but he was able to do very important jobs in favor of Venezuela, making very good relations with China and Russia and Turkey and many, many other countries. So we now have friends that help us in the needs that we have. And we really miss him. We miss him not only because his leadership, but because he was a very, very, an extraordinary human being. A real friend was Hugo Chávez. And the sin of Hugo Chávez was to be an anti-imperialist and to work against the Monroe Doctrine. That was what the bad thing that Hugo Chávez did. He was, a man who thought that we have to go to the root of the Venezuelan country that is the Bolivarian Republic. Bolivar is our leader, and he tried to get it back. So, Alison, I want to thank you. I want to thank all the people for this campaign in favor of the freedom of Alex Saab. We know that Alex Saab is an innocent. We know that he has been kidnapped, and we know that he is not a that he is a political prisoner. And we will have to work it from the political point of view, but we will keep going like INDHRIANA does, doing the work with the laws in the hands. We will show to the world that what the US is doing with Alex Saab is a real sin. There is no way they can explain what they are doing with Alex Saab. We will keep fighting, and we will fight it from the political point of view too. So again, thanks, Alison. Chávez vive in this country. Chávez vive in the soul of every Venezuelan. Chávez vive.
Chávez vive. Thank you, Professor Luis Acuña. I was reminded in the chat that you're also Minister of Education under Chávez's government. We are just tremendously fortunate to have your wisdom and words of solidarity and support, your vision with us every monthly picket action. And it's something as well that is especially important, marking 10 years of the passing of Comandante Chávez, that we can continue to learn from one another, to grow with one another, and to continue his legacy in all of our work. So thank you, Professor Luis Acuña. We are now, yes, at the unfortunate time to recognize that Father Jose Numa Molina will not be able to join tonight. He's not been able to find the internet connection that is strong enough. So we are going to go ahead onto the next section of the program, which is to have just a few greetings from folks across Canada who have joined us at the monthly picket action, who join very often at the monthly picket actions. And I also wanted to recognize that we have a special guest listening to our picket action today. Wilfredo Perez Bianco, the former Venezuelan Consul General here in Vancouver, Canada, is participating. So we wanted to say saludos to Wilfredo, and thank you for joining us here today. We miss you very much here in Vancouver. So for greetings today, which will come right before we do our group photo together, so get ready for that. I first wanted to invite Andrew Barry, who is here representing Mobilization Against War and Occupation, anti-war organization here in Vancouver, Canada. Welcome, Andrew.
Thank you, Alison. As an anti-war organizer, I just wanted to make a couple of reflections about the life of Comandante Hugo Chávez as we approach the 10th anniversary of his passing in the physical form. When Chávez passed away, it was almost, it's been almost 10 years, and it was almost 10 years after the US invasion and war on Iraq happened, which was in March 2003. And I think as an anti-war organizer, at that time, I didn't know much about what was happening in Venezuela, but through anti-war activity, came across what was happening a few years later, but what was happening in Venezuela and who Hugo Chávez was and what he was representing and what he was standing for. And he was standing for a better world, a world without imperial domination from the Western powers, especially the United States. And I think looking back at what Hugo Chávez said and what he did, he was very reflective of what every anti-war activist in the world wants. And he says it in sometimes the most bravest of stages of the world. When we look back at the war in Afghanistan, in the months after the September 11th, 2001 attacks in the United States began an inhumane, indiscriminate bombing campaign, murdering thousands of civilians in Afghanistan. And it was Hugo Chavez immediately who stood up and said, this is wrong. You cannot do this. You cannot kill civilians in Afghanistan for this. And it was in an atmosphere where here in Canada, in North America, that kind of criticism was unheard of. But Hugo Chavez stood up for what was right, what was moral, and saying to the United States, you can't do this to people. It was such a brave and such an important thing that we're looking back on history, there was no other voice like that, saying that at the time. And he was the president of a country, president of Venezuela. 2 years later, he was saying the same thing against the US war in Iraq, condemning that brutal invasion and occupation that killed over 2 million people in Iraq. Hugo Chavez went to Port-au-Prince in Haiti with people in Haiti who were against the US occupation, the Canada and French and United Nations occupation of Haiti. He went with the poor people in solidarity in Port-au-Prince and was treated so well by people in Haiti. President Chavez condemned the coup in Honduras in 2009, immediately recognizing it for what it is and not recognizing the coup regime installed by the United States on the people of Honduras. Hugo Chavez has been an inspiration for the anti-war movement around the world and for poor and oppressed people around the world. And it was so important for the United States to do what they could to take him out. But I think it's very important that what Chavez was able to do was to lay the groundwork for people in Venezuela to take over the leadership. And I think what President Nicolas Maduro, Diosdado Cabello, and other leaders in Venezuela have done under such brutal sanctions and blockade imposed by the United States is something that is very historically significant. Venezuela has survived an all-out economic war. As Allison mentioned earlier, up to 40,000 people were killed in 1 year alone that was conducted in a study in the United States due to the sanctions, just the sanctions the United States has imposed on Venezuela. But Venezuela, people in Venezuela have been able to stand up, continue to fight for their sovereignty, for their independence. And I think it's very, very significant that if Venezuela did fall during those years, I think we would have seen the fall of Bolivia. I think we would have seen not such a movement of progress that's happening across Latin America in places like Colombia and Mexico, where you have progressive governments. I think that the United States would have had such a huge victory if they were able to topple Venezuela. And it was because of the leadership by President Nicolas Maduro, Diosdado Cabello, and others that Venezuela has been able to continue on and to provide an example. And I think that the United States has done such an important job, a negative important job of trying to sabotage Venezuela everywhere possible. But there are still voices of resistance throughout the world that are supporting the revolutionary process that began under President Hugo Chavez and is continuing under Nicolas Maduro. And the United States has done everything in its power to stop sabotage and slow it down. And the kidnapping of Alex Saab is the latest example of that. And people in Venezuela and a solidarity movement around the world will continue to fight and continue to support that legacy of Comandante Chavez and the Venezuelan process. Free Alex Saab. Viva Chavez.
Thank you very much, Andrew Barry from Mobilization Against War and Occupation. I also have a message that has been posted in the chat from Mary Carmen Guevara. Mary Carmen is a longtime supporter of Venezuela and organizer in Ottawa with ALBA Movimientos, as well as Ottawa Cuba Connections. And she sent a message of solidarity to the chat because she is not able to speak on camera right now. So thank you very much to Mary Carmen Guevara for your support and solidarity and continued work for Venezuela and for freedom for Alex Saab. A reminder that today's Picket action has been 2 years of monthly consecutive actions and has been organized together with the Venezuela Peace Committee in Winnipeg, Canada, Just Peace Advocates, and the Fire This Time Movement for Social Justice Venezuela Solidarity Campaign. that concludes our program for tonight. It is now time for those that are able to join us for a group photo. We will in 1 second turn off the interpretation so we can chant together and share our voices, demanding freedom for Alex Saab. And as we promote people to be able to turn on your cameras, you'll see an image pop up on your screen that says, do you want to rejoin as a panelist? If you say yes, you will rejoin the picket as a panelist and will be able to turn on your camera. This process takes about 5 minutes for us to get through everybody. So in the meantime, as we begin posting in the chat as we begin promoting people as panelists, I'll re-announce the postcard campaign for Freedom for Alex Saab, where we are asking everyone on this call to reach out to your friends and your family and your organizations. Contact us at fttvenezuela@gmail.com, which I also put in the chat, to get copies, as many as you'd like, of the postcard, so we can really fill the post box of US President Biden demanding freedom for Venezuelan diplomat Alex Saab. I'll also announce an upcoming event, which we will post in the chat. Recently, 4 organizers with Fire This Time Movement for Social Justice traveled to Cuba in order to participate in the first international meeting of theoretical publications of left political parties and movements. And they're going to be reporting back on their experiences at that meeting, as well as at the Havana Book Fair and walking through the streets of Havana on March 3rd, Friday, March 3rd. So just a few days from now at 5 p.m. Pacific time, 8 p.m. Eastern time, and 9 p.m. in Caracas. So the information to register for that will be put in the chat. It has been put in the chat right now. I encourage people to register and find out more about that meeting and what is going on in revolutionary Cuba today. I've begun to invite people to join us as panelists. You should be able to turn on your camera. If you haven't gotten an invitation to join and you would like to, please raise your hand and we will make sure you get an invitation. As I mentioned, it can take a few minutes, so don't smile yet, because we have to get everyone upgraded into the webinar space. I appreciate your patience. Thank you again for joining us for our 2-year anniversary of monthly picket actions, and to our excellent panel. We missed having Father Numa Molina join us, but we will hopefully hear from him next month. But really appreciate the time and presentations of INDHRIANA Parada from the Free Alex Saab Movement in Venezuela, Suzanne ADELY from the National Lawyers Guild, NINO PAGLICCIA, a Venezuelan-Canadian writer and analyst here in Vancouver, and Professor Luis Acuna. You should be receiving the invitations now. Again, if you have not received one, please raise your hand and we will make sure that you receive one, and we will turn off our interpretation momentarily so we can all hear each other's voices. No worries if you don't have a sign or a t-shirt, just your voice is enough. Okay, I think we've still got a few people outstanding. Thank you again for your patience. We will also be continuing our monthly picket actions. So save the date for our action, which will take place in March. On March 28th, Tuesday, March 28th, we will once again join together to unite our voices to demand US-Canada hands off Venezuela, no to sanctions on Venezuela, and free Alex Saab. I think we have now sent everybody an invitation to join If you have not received an invitation and you would like to be able to turn on your camera, please raise your hand or indicate in the chat. Dulce, I see you, but I think you are here with us now. Okay. Here we are. Azza, go ahead and turn off our interpretation and we will chant together. And of course, thank you very much to our interpreters tonight again, to Anna and Mercedes for your tireless work to make it so we can have a fully bilingual webinar tonight.
Por ayudarnos a tener un evento bilingüe hoy. Muchas gracias.
Interpretation is off. Estamos aquí juntos, podemos levantar sus voces para libertad para Alex Saab. Free Alex Saab.
Free Alex Saab.
Free Alex Saab.
Alex Saab.
Free Alex Saab.
Free Alex Saab.
No suspension on Alex Saab.
Free Alex Saab.
Free Alex Saab.
Viva Alex Saab.
For the greetings from the Hamilton Coalition to Stop the War, just posted in the chat. Thank you for being here tonight. Free Alex Saab. Together.
Free Alex Saab.
Viva Venezuela.
Viva Venezuela.
Viva Venezuela.
Viva Venezuela.
Free Alex.
Viva Venezuela.
Venezuela no está solo.
Venceremos. We will win.
Venceremos. Venezuela no
La
está
victoria
sola.
siempre.
La victoria siempre.
Victoria siempre.
Good night,
Victoria
everyone. Buenas
siempre.
noches.
Victoria siempre.
Tell these people